PhotoShelter is the leader in online portfolio websites and tools for professional photographers. We help you get business, do business, and keep business.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alan Murabayashi speaking to you from actually PhotoShelter headquarters, Hawaii, where I'm visiting my parents. And we have a wonderful, wonderful presentation today for you with a guy that I've actually known for probably over a decade. But before we get to that, some housekeeping notes. Over on the right of your screen, you should see a GoToWebinar control panel. And from this control panel, you can ask us questions as we move along, and we will do our best to answer them or intersperse them into the conversation. And let me see if I can actually hide this panel here. Give me 1 second. That's a little bit better. And with that, let me introduce you to our speaker today, David Bergman. David, how are you doing?
Alan, I am amazing. I'm a little jealous that you are on the West Coast, the Pacific headquarters of PhotoShelter, and I'm here in New York City where it's about 40 degrees, but that's okay.
So I think the first time I actually saw you, or one of the first times, was the NPPA, the National Press Photographers Association Northern Short Course in Jersey City, and I really want to say that it was about a decade ago, and you were giving a presentation.
Was.
Yeah. And it's just been so interesting to see the evolution of your career. I guess at that point you had been recently turned into a freelancer in the New York tri-state area, and to see where you are today.
Yeah, I was right before that, or within a few years before that, I was a staff photographer at a newspaper down in Miami at the Miami Herald, and I moved to New York in 2001, and that was probably Jersey City. I did one before that in like 2001 or 2002, and Jersey City was probably, I don't know, 03 or 04. Yeah, it's probably been about 10 years. Amazing.
As we go along, for the audience, you can follow us along on Twitter at PhotoShelter, and if you have any comments or questions, you can use the hashtag PSWebinar, or if you're feeling kind of jokey, go ahead and hashtag Bon Jovi just for the fun of it. Why not?
Why not? What could possibly go wrong with that?
So, David, you, like me, were kind of started out as a musician.
I did, yeah. I was in, high school, growing up, junior high school, high school. I would say I was a band geek, right? I was a drummer. I played piano. That's really the path I was headed down. I went to the Berklee College of Music and was going to be a producer. That's what I thought I was going to do. I was going to be a music producer. I was sure of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, basically my sophomore year of college, I transferred back to the University of Miami, back to my hometown, and after being in Berkeley in Boston for the year, and I just kind of stumbled into the school newspaper one day, and it was obviously one of those days I look back on fondly because I went to the school newspaper and the school radio station, and I knew I would do one or the other, but probably not both. And for whatever reason, I followed up at the newspaper. There was a real good photo editor there at the time, my old buddy Mike Roy, who I'm still friends with to this day, and he gave me a roll of Tri-X. I'm sure nobody listening has any clue what that is, but the old film stuff, right? And I went out and shot for the weekend, and I went back, followed up, and he showed me how to process film and gave me my first assignment, and it took off from there. The next semester, I became the assistant photo editor, and then he graduated. I became the photo editor, and eventually the editor-in-chief of the yearbook, and that was the beginning. That's where it all started.
So you hadn't had any exposure to photography prior to sophomore year in college?
Exposure to photography. It's a pun. I get it. Yeah, not really. I mean, I had a camera as a kid. I had one of those little like disc cameras.
Yeah.
They were short-lived, but I always had 110 cameras and disc. But I really didn't take it seriously. I had no idea what I was doing. At some point, leading up to that first year at college, I had a Canon 81 program, which, my first sort of SLR camera. I don't even remember what lens was on that thing. It was probably a 50 or something like that. And yeah, I had no idea what I was doing. I was shooting film, and but I didn't know an aperture from a shutter speed. And then, when I stumbled into the newspaper office, was the first time I really had to sort of take it seriously. And then it was either later that semester or maybe even the next semester that my stuff was appearing in the school newspaper every week, and one of the other students came over to me and said, you should go over to the photojournalism program. Like they see your name, they know who you are, they're wondering who this guy is, this Dave Bergman, and you should go over and see him. So I walked over there, and the next semester I changed my major over to photojournalism.
And here we are with one of your many Sports Illustrated cover shots. How many have you had in your career?
Yeah, well, I'm not really keeping count, but I have 13. So
Yeah.
no, of course I'm keeping count. But yeah, this was a fun one. I mean, this was the Super Bowl a few years ago, obviously when Drew Brees and the Saints won. And I'd had a few covers before that, but obviously to have the cover at the Super Bowl was pretty
Yeah.
special. So
And this sort of skyrocketed sales of baby noise cancellation devices, if I
exactly,
recall
the
correctly.
headphones. Yeah. The cool thing was so the game obviously is on Sunday, and then the magazine usually doesn't come out till Tuesday night, and then it's usually delivered on Wednesday. But Monday, literally the next day, Breeze was on David Letterman, and the magazine called me and said, "Hey, they're going to unveil the cover. They're going to actually show Drew Brees the cover on Letterman." So Breeze
Oh,
hadn't
wow.
even seen it yet, and they like brought out a copy and showed him, and of course I got to watch that. That was pretty cool.
I know when major sporting events are going on, Sports Illustrated sends a ton of photographers to something like the Super Bowl. When you're shooting something like this, are you consciously thinking, cover shot? I nailed it. I got the cover shot.
Yeah, I think when I shoot for the magazine, really the picture that I'm trying to get in most issues, there's the cover, but then there's also what the section at the front that's called leading off. It's these three big two-page photos. We call them double truck photos, and it's supposed to be sort of the best three images from that week in the entire world. It can be from anywhere. Sometimes they have a theme to it, but most of the time it's just three great images. So when I'm shooting, I'm actually trying to get in leading off. That's what I'm trying to do, because the cover, to be honest, there's so little control over what's going to be on the cover. It has
Right.
to be the cover story, right? I mean, the Super Bowl obviously is going to be the cover, but on any given week, the magazine's covering a number of games. There's a number of other stories they have in the can. There might be a feature story on somebody. You have no idea what they're going to run on the cover. And even if they tell you in advance, hey, this might be a cover story, it changes usually. But if they tell you that on Friday, by Monday, it's usually changed. So I don't worry too much about the cover. I generally shoot horizontally. I'm not shooting vertically for the cover because you've got a lot more opportunities to run big in the magazine as a horizontal than you do as a vertical. So my camera generally doesn't turn vertically when I'm shooting sports, but the cover, it's just always a nice bonus when it happens.
And there's obviously, I guess nowadays with the sensors, there's enough resolution that you can crop in even if you shot it horizontal in the first place.
There is, yeah. I mean, even with film from horizontal, you could generally make a vertical cover out of a horizontal, but you can't go the other way, really. You can't take
Right.
a vertical and make it into a double truck, a two-page horizontal. This picture, actually, the Breeze photo, was a pretty big crop. I mean, I'm shooting, it's at about the 50. I think it was right in the center of the field, and that year, I was in we always have 4 corner seats, like the front row seats in the corners, and they put 4 of us. So they have a couple of guys on the sidelines, a couple of guys on the ground in the corners, and then 4 of us usually in the front row seats in the corners. And I was actually in one of those seats, and so that's 60, 65 yards away from where this was happening. And it's a 600 millimeter lens, but I don't even think it's full frame top to bottom. I mean, it's a pretty significant crop. So, but the background's clean enough, and it worked out nicely.
Yeah. So how many Olympics have you shot?
So I've done 5. Oddly enough, as a kid from Miami who grew up completely in warm weather, I've done 3 winters and only 2 summers. My first one was in Nagano, Japan in 1998, and I'll never forget the first day, the first assignment I got. I was working for the Miami Herald, and it was actually Night Rider Tribune, which was the parent company of the Herald, would bring a handful of the photographers from their newspapers all to the Olympics, and then we'd all shoot for basically all of the Night Rider papers. So the first day, the joke was, oh, let's send Miami Boy to cover the luge, right?
Right.
I'd never covered the luge in my life. I didn't even have the right clothing to wear in weather like that. So I go out there and I stand right up next to the track, and if you've ever seen the luge live, it is really fast.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. I thought, this will be easy. They just go by in a sled or something. And I kind of stood up next to the track, and you slowly hear this sound. It's like scraping ice coming, and then all of a sudden, shoom, and they're just gone. And I never even saw it fly by me. And I was like, wait, I think that was what I was supposed to just be photographing. So it took me, a good chunk of the day to kind of figure it out, but eventually I was able to make some different images. And then this was in 2006 in Italy, in Torino, obviously. And by then I had a better idea of sort of how to make a photo. But the key with a picture like this, obviously, is not just to cover the event and to document what's happening, but I had scouted this the day before. I went, earlier in the day for the trials, and I was there all day, and then saw this beautiful sunset in the mountain, and knew sort of where to place myself the next day when the competition was going on, so that I was ready for the photo.
The thing that strikes me about this image is, as we all know, like sunset, you don't have a whole lot of time for this, for the background ambient light to sort of match in a complementary way,
Yeah.
or foreground light. So, to get the bobsled kind of right where you wanted it, and get, I mean, it seems like a really, the moment was short to get this picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's, sort of high risk, high reward, right? You got to take that chance, and hopefully it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. I probably had a good 15 minutes while there was interesting light in the background, and you got to remember the track is lit. I mean, it's sort of consistent light. It's constant light. It's not, like high powered strobe lights or anything like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, to get that balance just right, you do kind of have to wait it out, and then hopefully you get a nice orange sled to go by to complement everything else.
Right.
Thank goodness for the Netherlands team there.
A lot of people would say, well, if I had the access that Dave has, then I could take these pictures too. And why is that statement naive or incorrect in your opinion?
Yeah, so what's funny is I know we're going to talk more about my work with Bon Jovi, but there have been times, even within the last few years, where I'm, let's say, standing in Bon Jovi's dressing room, or I'm standing right here in front of President Barack Obama, and I actually give myself a bit of a guilt trip. I say, because I do think something like that sometimes. I say, well, I'm not really doing anything interesting photographically here. I'm photographing the president. He's standing right there. I'm not really working that hard to make this photo. It's just right in front of me. Or John Bon Jovi's sitting in his dressing room. There's really nothing interesting here photographically. I'm not lighting it. I'm not doing anything crazy. But then, at the other hand, then my other brain kicks in and says, yeah, but it's taken you 25 years to be able to stand in this spot.
Right.
I am here, and I've been granted that access because of all the things I've done to lead up to this point, and nobody else is here. So, that's a huge part of what I do is getting access, and I have been fortunate to be able to get into places where really most people are just not allowed, and I can be the eyes of the public in many ways to bring them into places where they wouldn't normally be able to go. So I take that very seriously, and I obviously want to try to make an interesting photo and do something photographically that's beyond sort of just point and shoot. But at the same time, sometimes the image is just right there in front of you. This was at the All-Star game a few years back, and because of the picture I made at the inauguration, the Gigapan, which we'll get into, I had made some good contacts at the White House. And about a year later, I read that the president was going to be throwing out the opening pitch at the All-Star game in St. Louis, and so I reached out to my contacts, which I had kept in touch with, and I said, hey, for Sports Illustrated, it'd be great if I could come out and spend some time behind the scenes with him at the baseball park. And it was one of those things, with the White House, you never know. First they said there's no way it's going to happen, and then I pushed a little bit more, and eventually, it was like maybe, possibly. I actually got on the plane to go to the assignment the day before, not knowing if I had the access yet.
Wow.
And when I transferred in Atlanta, I remember seeing the email saying, "Okay, we need your, we're running the background check now, and you're in." So I was pretty ecstatic about that. And then I literally spent about an hour and a half under the stadium, walking around with the president. The White House press corps was out on the field just waiting for the pitch, and it was myself and Pete Souza, the president's photographer. We were the only still photographers in there. So I was in this tunnel with him right before he came out, and then I knew it was getting close to that time, so I ran out and stood at the top of the steps. And again, nobody else could be in that spot at that moment because I had literally just walked up these steps myself. And I just watched him, and he just took this moment where I've seen other pictures of him doing this. He just sort of collects himself and takes a breath, and it was very fast. I think I got one frame where his eyes are closed, and as they were announcing his name, and then he went out and did the whole thing. So, go ahead.
You mentioned that getting this access was sort of the result of you essentially networking. I guess I'm curious, as a freelancer, how many of kind of the high profile, or I guess gigs in general, that you're picking up are a result of you being kind of a gregarious guy who goes up and talks to people and keeps in touch with people. That seems to be so important in in furthering your career.
Gregarious, that's a good way to put it. I'll go with that as opposed to some of the other things I've been called. But, no, yeah, I mean, almost all of them come from that, right? This is the way the world works, and I used to be bothered by that, and I know people, that expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know, that rubs people the wrong way. But here's the thing. Put yourself on the other side. If you're a photo editor and you're going to hire somebody for a big assignment, who are you going to hire? You're going to hire somebody you've worked with before, that you know, that you trust, that you know what you're going to get, or are you going to take a chance on somebody that you have no clue, could be a wild card? Now, obviously, you have to take those chances sometimes if somebody really sticks out and you want to give somebody a break. But at the same time, you've got your own business to worry about, and you got to make sure you're going to get the right images. So like Sports Illustrated, there's not a lot of turnover at Sports Illustrated. I'm a freelancer there. I'm not a staffer. So, the staff guys, they've been there forever.
Yeah.
Right? Most of those guys, they're legendary guys. I'm fortunate to just freelance for them and for a while very, very regularly. But they sort of use the same people over and over because you don't have to start all over with somebody new. They know what they're going to get. So once I've made a connection with somebody, I really try, and they, hopefully I did a good job for them, or we got along, even if it was a social relationship, we get along well and we enjoy each other's company. I'm going to, certainly try to pursue that relationship as best I can, within reason. You don't want to be obnoxious about it, of course, but there's a balance there. So I'm sure I've pushed it occasionally over the years, but that's what I try to do. These guys are a great example, Bare Naked Ladies. I mean, I hooked up with them because of work I had done. Let me think. I had done something with Avril Lavigne. I have to sort of back up, how this one was because I knew this one, and then I had done some work with Avril Lavigne, and they at the time shared the same management company, not the same managers, but the same management company. And I remember seeing a news story that B&O was going back out on the road. This was probably in 2005 or something like that. They were going back out on the road, and I knew they were the same management company, and I contacted Avril's manager, and I said, hey, do you know anybody who deals with B&O? They said, oh yeah, their manager's right next door. I'll poke my head in, And she literally walked over and said, hey, this guy's a good guy and you should give him a shot. And I got the call that day.
Huh.
And then like a week later, I met up with them at a show in Philadelphia. So, and I did, 4 shows at the beginning, and then eventually I became their tour photographer, and I spent many years touring with them. I still keep up that relationship. I haven't really worked for them in an official capacity in a while because I've been out with Jovi, but I was home in August, I think, and they were playing in Brooklyn. I just happened to see, I try to stay on top of where everybody is, and they were in Brooklyn, and I just, contacted the band, and I said, hey, you mind if I come out and hang out, shoot some pictures? Yeah, come on out, no problem. So this was just, partially social, partially professional.
Yeah.
I went out, I had a good time out there at the show, and shot a couple pictures. I sent them a few frames afterward, and it's just keeping up that connection. You just never know where that stuff's going to go. The truth is, I genuinely enjoy being around the guys, and I do consider them to be friends. But at the same time, that's how it's worked with almost any professional relationship I've had.
I feel like you're the guy who was never nervous to ask the girl out. You're like, well, what do I have to lose?
Yeah, well, it's been a good year. What can I say? No. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I always was like that. I'll tell you what helped a lot was when I worked at the newspaper. I was probably a lot more shy as a kid. I definitely was. And when I got the job at the Miami Herald, I spent about 8 years as a staff photographer there. And it took a while for me to realize, okay, I need to get this done, right? I would be shooting any kind of a media event where there's a lot of people, even a protest or something like that, and I'd shoot the picture, and I have to get names, right? You have to get IDs for the newspaper. So it took me a little while, but then eventually you just realize, hey, what's the worst that happens? I've got to just walk up to these people and get their name. I need it. They're not going to publish it without the name. So you sort of get over that shyness and just do it. So yeah, since I went freelance, definitely I've had no problem sort of being that guy to just walk up to people. Another thing I try to do looking at this Penn State photo is throughout my career I've tried, and sometimes successfully, to think sort of outside the box, or I would say separate myself from the pack, right? Try to do something a little bit different than what everybody else does. And the reason is there's so many photographers now. I mean, there's always been, but there's more now than ever. And why would somebody hire me instead of anybody else, right? So this was Penn State and Notre Dame. I was shooting for Sports Illustrated a few years ago, and I kind of looked around like, oh, this is odd. Everybody's wearing white, but I didn't really think too much about it. And then usually just the student section on the right-hand side wears all white, and everybody else is normal. And they made an announcement over the PA. This is the first ever White House, they called it, where literally they asked everybody during the week to wear white. And so it was just kind of a cool fact. So I thought, okay, maybe that's a little bit different. Anytime there's something a little bit different or unique about an event, there's probably a picture there, right? So I thought, I got to get an overall picture of this. So I waited a little bit till the sun was starting to get a little lower, and I found a stairway and walked all the way up to the top. Of course, once I got up there, I realized there was an elevator, but I didn't I didn't see that until I was all the way up at the top. And again, this picture is not hard to make. Anybody standing there with the same lens and the same camera at that moment could have made that picture. How many other people were up there? None. There was nobody else that thought about it and made that photo, and that's what separated what I did. And you know, it just took sort of thinking about it rather than just spray and pray, as we call it, where you just shoot everything and then sort it out later. I actually made the conscious decision to go up there and make that photo. So and this picture, even though, like I said, in my mind there was nothing really interesting about it because I was just in the right place, that picture, I still get emails about it from Penn State fans all over the world who are crazy for it.
So I got to ask you, before we talk about the photography, being a guy who played drums, did you ever get the opportunity where John Bon Jovi was like, hey Dave, come up here and play with us?
No, that has not actually happened. I have sat at Tico Torres's kit a few times, like before sound check, on my own at a stadium, where you can hit the snare drum and you hear it reverberate off the, off the surrounding city, right? But no, I've never actually sat in with the band. I did it with Bare Naked Ladies once. Bare Naked Ladies one time, the drummer had a flight cancellation or something, and he actually missed sound check. And Ed Robertson actually did exactly that. He looked at me and said, "Hey Dave, why don't you sit in for sound check?" And I played a few songs with them during sound check. That was pretty cool. Just
That's
for the
awesome.
like the four guys who were setting up chairs in the audience. But that was fun. I've never done it with Bon Jovi though.
You're dealing in a lot of cases with very, very famous people. Do you ever get starstruck when you meet them?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to, because this is a profession, and I'm a professional, and they're a professional, and but certainly after the fact, I every once in a while I kind of look around and I go, really, I'm getting paid,
Right.
oh, and I get paid for this too. Okay, cool. When I'm on the private plane with John Bon Jovi, it's like you're kidding, right? Talking to him one on one, I don't, sort of get starstruck because I'm too busy thinking about what I'm going to say and having the conversation, but certainly, in my own private moments, it's ridiculous that I get to do this. So
what's in the camera bag when you're shooting a concert like this?
Yeah, so a typical Bon Jovi concert, what I do is I'm a Nikon shooter, so I have my sort of cameras that I carry on me are both D4s, which are amazing camera bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just workhorses, and I've put, I don't know how, 500,000 frames on probably each one of these bodies. So I have the two D4s. Generally I'm shooting zooms because I have that. It gives me that ability to to crop in camera and zoom in when I want to. So probably the 24 to 70 2.8 on one body, and then the 70 to 200 on the 2.8 on the other body. And people who aren't professional photographers often wonder why you'd have multiple bodies instead of just changing lenses. And the truth is, when something's happening, you just want to be able to switch really quick, right? If John, comes closer to me and I want to switch to that wider lens, I can't be changing lenses in the middle of the show. It's just not gonna happen. It's not practical. So the lenses are on the bodies; they don't come off. So those are my two sort of go-to setups. And then at the same time, on this tour, I've also brought with me the 200 to 400, which is an f4 lens,
Great
which
lens.
is amazing. I think it's probably my second favorite Nikon lens. The 600 is still my favorite, but you gotta love the 600. But the 200 to 400 has such there's so much range there from 200 to 400, and it's light, relatively speaking, and you can hand hold it, right? So basically, you don't have to use a monopod with it. So I will, during the show, I'll keep it backstage usually, and I'll go get it for 3, 4, 5 songs, and I can shoot tight pictures of John and of the other guys, who are sort of further back on the stage. David Bryan, the keyboard player, is way back there. Tico Torres is way behind the drum kit, and they don't move. They can't come out.
Yeah.
So they're a bit harder to get. So that's another thing that I'll try to do that's a little bit different than maybe what anybody else can do, is I have access to those long lenses and can make those pictures. The other thing I'll do, this picture is actually from a remote camera. The picture, the Bon Jovi picture before, is from a remote, and that's something I do with my sports work, and sort of a lot of the Sports Illustrated guys have done, and they made that into a really accessible thing for the rest of us. And I sort of took that sports mentality and brought it to the concert stage. So this camera, even though I'm allowed to shoot on the stage, I try not to. I mean, I don't want to go stand out on stage. It would be really distracting to John and to any fans that happen to see me. So I try not to go on the stage. So a picture like this, it actually looks like I'm standing in the middle of the stage looking at him. Well, in reality, I've got a camera, either a D4, or a lot of times I have the D3s now that I'm using as remotes, and I have it clamped onto something. So more often than not, I'm clamping onto something at the drum kit, either a mic stand or something else that's around there, and I'll just clamp it on using a magic arm, and I can clamp it and put it anywhere I want. And I'll generally, I can preset the exposure, focus. Sometimes I've gone back and forth. Usually I'll autofocus that camera because he moves around a bit too much. So I'll put it on autofocus, and then I can't obviously see through the camera, but I'm triggering it with a pocket wizard, and I can be out in the audience, and when he turns around like this, I can just mash down the button, and if I shoot 50 frames of this and I get one, that's all I need, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that remote, I might shoot 1,500 frames a night from that remote, and if I get one or two great frames, then I'm still ahead of the pack.
Wow.
So that's something that I've done for a long time now.
Here's the first work that we saw that you're actually lighting.
Right, yeah. So I also do a lot of these portraits. I haven't done much this year, but I've got a handful of magazine clients and band clients that I'll do portraits for. And another thing that I often tell young photographers is how important it is to know how to light, because anybody can shoot basic concert photos, right? You just kind of walk up, the lighting's already there, and you just shoot it, right? So but to be able to go in and actually work with an artist and set something up and have a sort of a creative vision and light it in a way that makes it interesting is a lot harder to do. So if you actually want to be a professional photographer, that is one of the big keys, is being able to light. You got to be able to do something that not everybody else can do. So this was a band called All Time Low, and this was right before they made it big, and I was photographing them for Kerrang! Magazine, which is a rock magazine out of the UK. And they're one of these bands that at the time I came in and they're like, yeah, we've been photographed 100 times, they're like playing it all cool. And I said, all right, well, let me just do a couple things, and I'll be ready in a few minutes and whatever. And I'm gelling the lights, and I'm I'm putting them all over the place. And and I talked to them about, we'll do this jump, and we're in a hallway at a venue. This was right before a show. And so they go ahead and do it, and I shoot a couple of frames, and I show them on the back of the screen, and it's like, oh, all right. We've never quite seen that before, because they're not seeing the gels, they're not seeing the color, obviously, when I'm shooting it. So it's always kind of fun to go in and do that, and actually work with a band directly and to create something new. I didn't really start doing that until I went freelance. I wasn't very good at it in the newspaper days, but since I've gone freelance, I've really try to work on my portrait work and my lighting to help advance my career.
Now, I remember when this project came out. Tell us a little bit about this.
This was amazing. This was the Art Gallery of New Jersey back in 2005, and they approached me. They were going to do a big project. I think it was supposed to be 100 photographers, 100 of the sort of best regional photographers, New York, New Jersey area that they could find. And what it was kids who were in the New Jersey adoption system. I had never seen these books before that, but apparently if you go in to adopt a child, they had these books that were like mugshot books, basically, and just horrible Polaroids of kids, and you'd sort of skim through them, and these kids all looked horrible. I mean, they weren't sort of flattering photos of any of these kids. So they came up with this idea: let's do these really nice portraits, have photographers come in and do portraits of them, and hopefully get them adopted. And I mean, I was just honored to even be asked. Obviously, everybody volunteered for this, and it was a really amazing project. And when they came to me, I said, well, I'm not really good at the sad kid photos. They said, no, no,
Right.
no, we don't want that. We want you to do your thing. Like if you're a sports guy, do sports. So I went to this. This was in a home, and there were a number of kids that I was supposed to photograph. And at first, I wanted to go out and like throw a football around with them and just have fun and have them playing outside. Problem is, it was raining, and so we go indoors. I had all my lights with me, and I remember looking at the bed and saying, I wonder if we can have these kids jump on the bed. So I kind of asked, can we do it? And they were like, nah, I'm not so sure. So I went over to the kids. You guys want to jump on your bed? They're like, yeah, 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 that'd be great. So, and that was part of it. It's just having fun with it, right? They don't really know what I'm doing. They don't really understand it, but I just wanted them to have fun. So we had a great time. I was there for a number of hours, and I brought everybody Sports Illustrated hats, and it was really a good time. And then the best part of this was that it was just one day out of my life, and I sort of went on with my work. And then maybe a year, maybe 2 years later, I got an email from somebody, and she had said, "Oh, one of the kids you photographed for the Heart Gallery, his name was Joshua, and I'd love to get a print of the photo you made of him." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm happy to do that. But, why do you want?" She said, "Well, I've just adopted him, and he's coming home next week for the first time, and I want to have the picture hanging on his bed, over his bed when he gets here for the first time."
That's awesome.
And, I wept. I wept, I mean,
Yeah.
it was really emotional because that, what we do, I mean, what I do is very, it's fun and it's goofy and it's just a good time. But this actually like changed two people's lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this kid who may never have been adopted, he may have aged out of the system and never been adopted, wound up in a really good home because of just something I did one afternoon. And certainly I can't take credit for it because it was, the idea had been come up with by people way smarter than me. But I was really honored to be a part of it, and everybody did amazing portraits. They had a big gallery show. It got a lot of press, and it just goes to show the power of a still image. And I try not to take that for granted every day when I'm working.
Yeah, they're just phenomenal. And the blue wall, I just, I just love that blue wall too.
Yeah,
It's like, wow.
exactly. I was up there painting it all night. No, I'm just kidding. And then there's another good example. This was after after Hurricane Sandy came through. I went this was because of context that I had. I did the last Olympics in London for NBC and Sports Illustrated, and I had made some good contacts at NBC. And when Sandy hit, between my NBC contacts and John Bon Jovi, I contacted NBC and I said, "Hey, let me come down." They were doing a benefit show, not 12-12-12 yet, but this was just a what do you call it, a telethon on the air like 3 days after the hurricane had hit. And everybody was going to be there, and I said, "Hey, let me just come down and I'll set up a portrait booth down the hall wherever you can make space for me, and we'll sell prints and I'll donate the money to the Red Cross." I just wanted to help in any way I could. I can't give $1 million, but I can make pictures and try to raise some money that way. So again, it's one of those things that I had no idea if it was actually going to happen. And last minute, literally a few hours before the show, they said, "Okay, you're in. We got a space for you. Get down here." And I had to rush down to Rockefeller Center, and I set it up down the hall. And John Bon Jovi was gracious enough to do the first one, and then I was able to show everybody else that photo. And literally, it was just whoever I could get to come down the hall to make this photo. So we got Whoopi, we got Steven Tyler, Jon Stewart. It was it was a whole bunch of really great people. And the thing was, photographically, I wanted to keep it very simple. It's two lights. I've got one big softbox in the front, and I've got one on the side for fill. Very simple. One lens, 85 1.4 quote portrait lens.
Yep.
And that was it. And because I made a conscious effort to try to get something out of these people instead of, I mean, these are all people who've been photographed millions of times, right? And I didn't want to just make their traditional picture face. I wanted something different. I wanted to connect with them in some way. The challenge was I had each person for literally a minute or less.
Right.
Because as I was pulling them down the hallway, I would tell them, that was my whole shtick, it's only going to take a minute, don't worry, because if they're not going to sit there and pose for 15 minutes. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that was the deal. Okay, if you come down, it'll just take 1 minute, and if you tell them it's going to take 1 minute, it has to take 1 minute. So it was a long enough hallway that in that 30 seconds it would take to walk down the hallway, that was my time to connect with them as we were walking down the hallway, and then stand them in front of my backdrop and make the picture at that point, and then let them go. So I was shooting 10 frames, 15 frames of each person, and I was proud of the fact that I kept it really simple and just tried to get that connection and tried to pull something out of each person that maybe they weren't necessarily ready to give, but then I pulled it out of them.
After being in the biz for 20, 25 years, do you still get nervous in situations like
Oh,
this?
absolutely, absolutely. No, this job in particular, I was freaked out. I mean, nobody else knew that, but I mean, think about the talent that's there, and half the battle, 90% of the battle, like I said, was getting them down the hall,
Yeah, yeah,
which was not easy because this was not part of their contract or anything. Like, oh, you have to go take this picture. It was just literally me there saying, "Hey, can you come do this, please, for the Red Cross?" And some of them said no, honestly,
right.
and I pushed as much as I could, but many of them graciously said yes, and yeah, I mean, I've got to nail it, right? I've got a minute, and I can't. If I'm doing the Super Bowl for Sports Illustrated and the game-winning touchdown happens in front of me, I gotta have it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just have to have it. I can't. There's no plan B there. You can't go back to your editor and say, "Oh, sorry, my battery died," or "I was out of focus," or
Yeah.
that's just not an option at this level. You can't miss it. You just gotta nail it. So yeah, I do get the adrenaline flows through me, and I do get quite nervous in situations like that.
This quote that you have here, I mean, normally I just say
So
YOLO.
yeah, so this is kind of how I feel about everything I do. Yeah, exactly. You only live once. Same kind of thing. The way I look at everything is, you can only deal with the information you have in front of you, right? So you do the research, you learn as much as you can about any kind of decision, and then you make a decision based on that information, and don't regret it afterward, right? If life's hopefully we're all going to live a very long time, and we're going to be adjusting and making changes as you go, but you make the decision, you go forward, and then you make adjustments if it wasn't quite the right thing. But I never look back and say, oh, I regret that I did this or didn't do that. It's like, well, at the time it was the right thing for me to do, and now I'm going to do something else.
Making the decision to go freelance obviously is kind of one of these big life altering steps, and I'm wondering whether through that experience your
Yeah,
attitude
I think we're
towards
losing
like
out a little bit here.
being more open to trying new things has changed and evolved.
Sorry, Alan, we're losing you a little bit,
Oh,
but you're asking me about going freelance, and that decision at that time again was based on quite a few factors. I was married at the time. I'm no longer married, but I was at the time, and my wife and I just we had both lived in Miami a very long time, and I had sort of the safe job at the newspaper, a staff job with benefits and the whole deal. And I just got to the point where I kind of felt that I had hit my wall of how far I could go with it. And it was a great job, don't get me wrong, but every year I was covering the Dolphins season and I was covering the Miami Heat season. And okay, season ends and you do the other stuff, and then you come back to the same Dolphins season again. And it just seemed quite repetitive to me, and I was ready to sort of go on to the next thing. So now at the Herald here, I did have some amazing assignments. '96 there, I was with I pitched the story to Go on the Road with Gloria Stefan. So she was a local Miami hometown hero, and she was coming back after a big injury, and I had always wanted to go on tour with somebody. So I actually did spend a week or so with her on the tour bus with her family and had a blast. And that sort of planted the early seed for me to do the tour photography that I do now. But and we had some great, yeah, there's Gloria. That was I remember at the time she said that was her favorite photograph of her. And again, it sort of uses that sports mentality that I have. So that worked out nicely. And then there were a few other big events while I was there. There was the Marlins won the World Series, and the Panthers were in the Stanley Cup Finals. And I covered a lot of spot news too, and that was partially because I was one of the first full-time digital guys at a major metropolitan daily newspaper. And so now, instead of having a team of people go to, let's say, Nicaragua and set up a darkroom and cover a hurricane, they could just send me by myself, and I could transmit with a satellite phone from the top of a mountain. I didn't have to go and set up a whole darkroom and have a whole team of people with me. So there were a few years there where I was doing a lot of spot news for the paper, and So even though I wasn't really the news guy, I was kind of the sports guy. So that was a great experience for me. Again, sort of helping to bring me out of my shell and teach me how a little bit more about the world and traveling.
Were you
But
always kind
then,
of into the technology and the new gadget?
I was always kind of a geek. I liked playing with the new stuff. I always felt that I'd rather be ahead of the curve than behind it, right? So digital, I mean, we all knew digital was coming. We knew it was going to be a thing. We didn't know exactly how far it would go, but we knew it was going to be a thing. So I could be one of those guys who's using it and helping to develop it and actually working with the camera companies to make it better in a way that's usable for me, or I could wait and stick my head in the sand and then have it forced on me, 5 years later, went against my will. And I'd rather be in front of the curve than behind it. This was the World Series. That was sort of one of my first. I don't know if it was my first. One of my first really big pictures. I mean, this was literally, it was Game 7, bottom of the 11th inning in Miami. The Marlins were only 5 years old, and they won the World Series. It was, to this day, the most dramatic ending of a World Series game. Maybe now it's number 2 after St. Louis a few years ago, but it was a pretty amazing thing. And obviously, I was vested in it because it was my hometown team, and I had been covering them for the since before they were even in existence. So this was the last out, and Edgar Renteria hit a bloop single, and Craig Counsell here ran home. I also made a conscious decision to follow Counsell rather than follow the batter, which most of the other pictures I saw from this, they followed Edgar Renteria running to first. He sort of ran in front of us, but I went a little wider and shot Counsell, and obviously you can see the fans behind there. I think every person in the stands there contacted me after this picture
Right.
ran, because they wanted a print, right? So, and this picture ran. This was the front page of the Miami Herald. I think it's the biggest photo ever to be on the front page because it was 6 columns, almost the whole page.
Wow.
And since then, they've shrunk the paper actually, so it will never be as big as that picture was. So, yeah. So, and they made T-shirts and they made posters, and I still run into people who were around during that time. They say, "Oh, I have that hanging in my wall on my wall at home." So, this was sort of my first experience with the big event. And then this was that hurricane in Nicaragua, and this picture, again, photographically, I'm just there, but this really taught me a little bit about photojournalism and the importance of it, in that myself and a reporter were one of the first ones in after this hurricane came through and literally killed 10,000 people, right? And I grew up sort of in a sheltered middle-class neighborhood in Miami, and had never experienced anything like this. And I was covering sports and music and fun things like that. And now all of a sudden, because I was digital, they sent me in the middle of this and a number of other assignments like this. And I'll never forget, because as I was shooting this photo, I felt horrible, right? This woman literally lost everybody in her family. Her kids, her brothers, her sisters, her parents, everybody was killed like the day before, 2 days earlier. And obviously she was distraught. And I felt a lot of guilt for okay, I'm working, I'm getting paid to do this. I'm staying at a hotel in Managua, having room service tonight, and she literally has lost everybody. So I felt horrible about it, but I knew I had to shoot it, so I stayed back. I shot it with a bit of a longer lens. I didn't want to get in her face, but I made the picture, and then that night I transmitted it back, and then the next day I remember calling in the paper and saying, "Hey, what'd you guys run?" And they said, "Oh, we ran the picture of that woman crying on the front page," and an amazing thing is happening, because people are in line at the grocery store and they're seeing the picture because it was above the fold on the paper. They're seeing the picture, and by the time they get to the cash register, they're asking the woman working there how they can give money to help that woman in the paper.
Wow.
So I sort of got it then. I still don't enjoy covering this stuff, and I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I've chosen to not cover news anymore, but I have nothing but the utmost respect for people who do. And I mean, you obviously have to have a real passion for it, and that's why, because after this ran and after we reported it, then CNN came in, and then everybody else came in, and this picture hopefully did a lot more good in helping the whole region than if I had just given her a sandwich or whatever, something else small like that. So there's a lot of power in photojournalism. Again, I've now chosen, especially as a freelancer, to not cover that kind of thing, because it's just not something I enjoy doing. But I thank goodness for people who are doing that work.
You went freelance in '01. You moved to New York City. you hustled and bustled, and I love this quote because it's not one little thing that pushes you over that threshold to become successful. It's the entirety of your efforts.
Yeah, it's the entirety of it, and it's continuous. It never ends. I mean, I'm still out there hustling, right? So I think people come to me sometimes, or I'll be having a conversation with somebody, and they'll say, "Oh, I won this award and I didn't get any work," or "Oh, I had the cover of this magazine and I didn't get any work." Well, that's just one little piece of it, and those things are all great. But like for example, photo credits. I can't think of one time and that I know of where I got a job because of a photo credit. Even the cover of Sports Illustrated, nobody that I know of opens the magazine, looks at the photo credit, and says, "We got to hire that guy." Right? It doesn't work that way. However, me being able to say I have 13 Sports Illustrated covers certainly helps, right? But even that alone, I don't think is enough. It's got to be that and all the other things that I'm doing, and all the awards and whatever else, those kind of things you come in, and promo pieces and social media and all those other things. As a whole, I think helps to, you're earning your reputation and you're advancing your career. And sometimes I've made connections with people and I haven't gotten a job from them, sometimes never, and sometimes it's years and years later that eventually you finally just hook up at the right time. You keep in touch. So my marketing philosophy, I actually call it poke marketing, and I'm going to trademark that, so don't take that. But it's going to be the book one day. It's going to be a very small book. It's going to be one page. But this is what poke marketing is. You ready? This is it. Poke, 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 poke. It's literally just keeping in touch with people. It's continuing to work relationships without being too obnoxious about it. And just over time, I have people who once a year, once every 2 years, I'll check in with, or I'll maybe send them a print, right? That's another thing too, is that sending prints is an amazing marketing tool, because if I get say a photo credential from a publicist, and even if they didn't go too far out of their way, but they just were nice enough to issue me a credential and they were pleasant about it, from that concert, I may send them a print, make a nice 11 by 14 on good paper. You sign it. It doesn't take me that long. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You send it to. I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and they call me the next day and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you sent a print. I'm hanging it on my wall." I mean, it doesn't even have to be an amazing photo.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's a good photo too. But that just doesn't happen anymore. When somebody gets something like that in the mail, they think about you and they're going to remember you. So even famous people, there's a video out there of me with Bon Jovi, when I had only been working with them a few months, and in the middle of that first tour, I made these little photo books, and I just of what I had done sort of in the first few months of the tour, and I gave them to the band, and they were all like, "These are great, these are amazing." And if I had just emailed them photos, it would have been like, "Yeah, that's cool,"
Yeah.
But
yeah.
to have a physical book that they can take home, even Richie Sambora and John Bon Jovi, I was even blown away by the fact that they were so interested in it. So that kind of thing goes a long way, and that's part of my whole poke marketing. You just got to keep poking, keep pushing, keep in touch with people, and you never know where that next gig is.
You said something interesting, which was a photo credit never got you a gig, and so I wonder about how you feel about young photographers who say, "Well, you don't have to pay me. I'll just take that photo credit that you offered."
Yeah, I think it's a horrible idea. I mean, look, if you have to treat yourself like a professional, you want other people to look at you as a professional. I can't think of very many other professions where sort of they'll do it for free just for the enjoyment of doing the job, right? This is a job. Now, granted, it's fun, don't get me wrong, but there's certainly a lot of work that goes behind it. And the shooting part, the really fun part, is only about 5% of my actual work. The rest of it is all the marketing, and of course there's the editing on the computer and all that stuff, and the taxes and the billing and the invoicing and all of that other stuff that comes with running any other small business. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of shooting for free. The only time I would say it works is if you're going to get something else out of it, for sure, right? So, for example, I have had some artists where if I make a connection with somebody and I'm trying to get a tour with that person, let's say, and so I would be willing to come in and maybe shoot a show, especially if it's local. It's not going to cost me that much to get there on a day when I don't have another gig. And I'll go and I'll shoot, and I'll give them like a handful of web resolution images with my watermark on it, right? Just so they can see, so I can show them what I can do, right? I see value in that because they can't really do too much with the photos. They put it on their website, which is fine. But other than that, I'm trying to show them what to do. And then it's like, okay, if you want to hire me, now we're talking money and all that other stuff. So that's the only time, because I'm trying to get somewhere else with it, I can see the value in it. But just to actually shoot a job for somebody and give them full res images or prints, whatever, for free,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I just don't get it. And people think that, well, you've got to get a foot in the door, so do that. But unfortunately, if you're known as the free guy or the cheap guy, you're always going to be that guy.
Yeah.
That when they're ready to hire a real photographer to pay a lot of money to, it's not going to be you. It's going to be somebody who's been charging a lot of money and who's more advanced in the business side. It's just I've just seen it over and over again. There's always exceptions to every rule, but I don't think it's a smart way to go personally.
Here's another quote about really knowing the ins and outs of specific industries and whatnot. How has this really kind of influenced the way that you deal with, a John Bon Jovi?
Yeah, so I think every industry has its own, I use the word protocols here, where you've got to understand the world that you're working in, right? So the touring world, for example, is an interesting place. I mean, there's sometimes 80 to 100 people traveling either on tour buses or on planes or whatever, all together, and everybody has their own job, and usually at this they're all working at a very high level, and you kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, you kind of have to know how to hang. You've got to know how to act around celebrities. You've got to know how to act around roadies and other people like that.
Yeah.
And a big part of my gig with Bon Jovi, or with any band, when I come in, is I try very hard to fit in, right? I want to win over the guys who are already there, because everybody else is there. They've been doing this gig forever, and then I come in as an outsider sometimes, and I have to work intimately in their world, and I don't want to intrude on what they're doing, of course, but I have to very quickly be able to get in there so that I can do my job. So it means learning how to operate in that world, and in the touring world in particular, in any industry, there's just sort of ways to act and ways not to act. And if you come in and nobody wants to be around you, then you're not going to be on tour for very long.
So true.
It doesn't matter how good a photographer you are. If nobody can stand you and they just don't like the way you are, you're just not going to be there very long. Nobody's going to hire you.
So an image like this is not an image that you make on day one. I mean, at what point, was the relationship with these guys solid enough where they're like, yeah, man, we don't even see Dave there anymore. You can.
I have to point out this image is if I turned around, you'd see there's a body of water behind me. This is in Istanbul, Turkey, and we are on the Bosphorus, right? This is right outside the hotel.
Uh-huh.
And this is just another day in the life of Bon Jovi, right? So we were going to dinner, and so we came out of the hotel. We literally took a boat right behind me, a boat on the Bosphorus this was dinner night, but the next day for the show, we took a boat down the street to a helicopter and then took a helicopter to the venue. So,
the life.
Just another day in the life. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to get to this point where they don't even see you anymore. You're just there. I mean, obviously they see you. John has told me that there are only about 2 or 3 people who can come into his dressing room unannounced, and I'm one of them. But the thing is, just because I can do it doesn't mean I do it, right? So I will go in there. I'll come in. Now we're at the point where we're close enough where he'll roll his eyes. Oh, there's Bergman again. He just kind of knows, but he still puts up with me and he continues doing whatever he's doing. It's gotten to that point, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. You don't want him to obviously be, to change anything that he's doing when you're in there. But at the same time, I can go in, I can stand there with Richie and John. I'm only 6-10 feet away, and make this picture, and they don't care. They trust me to a point now where I don't remember what they were talking about, but whatever they're talking about, if I'm hearing it, if I'm not hearing it, it doesn't matter. They sort of trust me on that, and I think it just happens over time. I mean, you have to earn it, right? I mean, I've got images that of John that nobody's probably ever going to see, because I've been with him in his dressing room. I've been with him in the operating room when he had his knee surgery in 2011. I was literally in the operating room. He's unconscious with his eyes taped up and the thing down his throat, and I'm wearing scrubs and taking pictures of the surgery. I don't know if we're ever going to release those. We may or may not, but he knows I have those. He trusts me that I wouldn't put them out without us having a big discussion about it first. So this was a nice moment where we had a show in upstate New York where it was actually raining and lightning and raining so hard they had to stop the show in the middle, and everybody went back to the dressing rooms, and we were just all standing around waiting for the rain to stop, and I can stand right in front of him and he doesn't even notice anymore. So that's, as a journalist, as a photojournalist, it's a dream gig. I mean, you might think, tour photographer, it's not as heavy as doing war photojournalism or natural disasters, but for me, having that level of access and being able to really document what's happening and nobody sort of cares and nothing changes because I'm there, that's true photojournalism to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, like, for myself, who in my life would I allow to just come into my bedroom at any time? And the answer is, like, no one. Like, the level
Right.
of trust is amazing.
Yeah, and obviously he's so well known, and he potentially has so much to lose by doing that, but I've gotten to the point where he trusts me.
So staying relevant, learning new talents, I've always said that I've thought you've done an amazing job just being on the cusp of things like social media and being very good at self-promotion. And here's kind of a technical bent as well, like learning video and being one of the first guys that did a lot of the Gigapan stuff. Tell us about how you got into that.
Yeah, video is just one little other piece of my toolkit, as I say, and it I haven't done a lot of video over the years, but it's definitely something that's helped me because I have that ability and I can do it when I have to. I've done a few music videos with independent bands, and then for Bon Jovi on this last tour, I actually shot a whole bunch of behind the scenes footage that they used in a major music video, which was cool. That I planned it out exactly, but I was credentialed to photograph the inauguration, which I was so excited about, just as a traditional still photographer. And what I did do is I actually spent a lot of time thinking about it ahead of time. Like, I always ask myself this question before any new assignment. I always say, why am I there? Why am I going? What do I bring to the table? What am I going to do that's different from what everybody else is doing? Because if I'm doing the same thing as everybody else, there's no reason for somebody to pay me to be there. So there's going to be 500 of the world's best photographers at this inauguration. Why am I there? Why am I wasting anybody's time by being there? So I thought, okay, I'm going to, besides the fact that obviously this is the historical inauguration of our first black president and all that, what else is important in the story? Well, there's going to be 2 million people here, right? So how can I document that? So I spent a lot of time doing research on how to make these sort of wide panoramics and high resolution panoramics, and I came across this Gigapan, and it is you can already shoot sort of manually overlapping photos and stitch them together to make a bigger image. Well, the Gigapan allows you to shoot hundreds of overlapping photos and then stitch them together and make an incredibly high resolution image. So literally the first time I used the Gigapan was at the inauguration.
It was?
And
oh my gosh.
It absolutely was. The very first time. I called the company, I said, has it ever been used at like an event where there's a lot of people? Because it was developed by NASA for the Mars rover program, and it only really been used on landscapes. And they said, well, no, but we'll send you a loaner and let you try it out. Okay, no problem. So I brought it to the inauguration, and in between shooting my real photos, I ran the Gigapan unit, and I did this picture. And yeah, basically it went crazy viral. It got 20 million views, and I did an interview on CNN, and it brought down my website every 5 minutes, and it was insane. And basically, yeah, if you were at the inauguration, or even if you weren't, there were so many celebrities and politicians and famous people there that I was getting emails from people saying, we have been at work all day and aren't getting anything done because we're just spending all day panning around this photo. And, as you zoom in, I mean, literally that's the level of detail you can see from this image. And every once in a while I get an email that was going around about, oh, look what the KGB are doing, or,
right.
the FBI are doing, these super X-ray cameras or whatever. And this is just a regular this was actually a point-and-shoot camera, because at the time the unit was very small and it could only hold a point and shoot. Now it takes big cameras, but it was just a point and shoot camera, and it just shoot hundreds of overlapping photos to make one giant high-res image. And then since then, I've taken this technology and applied it in other places. I took it to my other clients, the first big one being MLB.com, Major League Baseball.com, and first did one World Series game with it, and it actually was really popular because if you were at a game like the World Series, now you could find yourself in the image and prove to all your friends, hey, I was at the World Series, right? So, right? I mean, that's what it is. And so since then, MLB.com now does them at every playoff game, and I'm a big part of that team until this year when I was on the road with Jovi all year. And I've done them at the Super Bowl and the Olympics, and for NBC and the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting I did last year, and it's become a big part of my my career. So I'm pretty happy about that.
And really, just because you took a chance on it, it wasn't really anything planned.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I didn't plan it to be a big part of my career, but I did definitely plan to do something different. I wanted to do something unique. I didn't just want to shoot the same picture as the guys standing around me. Guys and girls, excuse me.
The pace of technological change, does it get tiresome to sort of keep up? Feel like you need to keep up with the Joneses?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned social media, and I got to say, when I'm on tour, it's been insane to try to keep up. I used to really blog very consistently. Twice a week, I'd have a new blog post, and I really let my blog go by the wayside because, well, for two reasons. First of all, because I was on tour, I just literally didn't have the time. Also, every blog post would have been about Bon Jovi for the last 4 years, so
right.
I think that would have gotten old. Not everyone, but almost everyone. And Facebook kind of took over as my medium for spreading some of that information that used to be on my blog. I do want to get back to it at some point. I like writing those sort of longer form pieces about shoots. If nothing else, just for myself, it's been kind of like a diary of my career so far. It's nice to look back, but. Yeah, I mean, as soon as the GigaPen now is still somewhat popular with some of my clients, but I know it won't last forever. Yeah. So it's like, what's next? What's going to be the next thing that I can do? The next Olympics or the next Super Bowl, instead of just shooting. This Super Bowl I'm working for Sports Illustrated, so I'm just shooting game action. But 5 years from now, what am I going to be shooting at the Super Bowl or the Olympics? That's going to be different. Why am I there? What's the point?
Looking forward to 2014. I mean, the one that caught my eyes, you finally got a swimsuit calendar shoot.
I know, right? So when you say you work for Sports Illustrated, the first question people ask, do you do the swimsuit issue?
Right.
Well, no. Unfortunately, no. Yeah, actually, as you probably know, the swimsuit issue is basically a separate magazine.
Yeah.
It's, there's a whole different staff of people that work on that all year round, whereas us sports guys are actually putting out a magazine every week. But not that I'm bitter about that or anything, but... So yeah, I got this gig I'm going to be doing early next year. I'm shooting this swimsuit calendar in Belize, of all places, for Bellican Beer Company, and they put out a calendar every year. And getting back to the networking thing, this was a Shelley Stonecipher, who's one of my great friends. She was one of my editors at the Miami Herald in the 90s, and we've kept in touch over the years. I've done portraits of her family, and when she lived here in Maryland, well, now she lives in Belize, and she's a bigwig with this company. It's a family company, and she last year had hired me to do the calendar for 2014, and then I got the Bon Jovi tour, and I actually had to back out. And she said, "Well, I'll let you out of your contract if you promise to do next year." So I was like, "Okay, you got a deal." So I'm booked. I'm doing this calendar, and yeah, I'm going to spend a few weeks down there just shooting swimsuit models, and it's going to be pretty amazing.
I'm available to hold the reflector if you need anyone.
Yeah, no problem. I'll put you on the list.
So let me ask you a final question, which is, obviously a lot of success in your career, I think, is timing in a lot of cases. You were on the cusp of digital, you're on the cusp of the GigaPen, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm a young photographer who's looking to sort of pattern my career after what you've been able to accomplish, knowing how the climate has changed in the past, 10, 20 years, what sort of advice would you impart?
Well, the bad news is you can't do it the same way I did it, right? The paradigms have all changed. I came up through the newspaper world, and so when I went freelance, I already had a good 10 years of professional experience. That's not going to happen for most people, and because this is a creative field, everybody kind of has their own path. The good news is, here's the good part, is that in today's world, there is more use for visual information than ever before in history. There's more images out there. They're being used everywhere. I mean, you can't get into an elevator now without seeing images on a TV screen or video or whatever it is. Visual information, meaning video and audio together, and stills. They're everywhere. So the trick is you've got to think about it. You've got to actually, spend some time not just taking every job that comes your way, but try to plan out your career a little bit and find your own path. And the other thing is, I believe it's better to specialize than to be a generalist. Because there's so many photographers now, if you just are good at everything, you're really good at nothing. Because who's going to hire you if it's like, if they can get the best guy at that? I mean, I would hope that there are bands out there that maybe when they're looking to hire a tour photographer, they say, well, Bergman's the guy. We got to have him. He's the best tour photographer. I'm certainly not, but that's what you want. That's what you hope for. So, whereas if it's like, well, he's good enough to shoot it and he can shoot a lot of other things, then you're not going to get hired that way. So if you really focus, find a thing that you love to do. I love the music business. I love the concert business. I love live touring and the big spectacle and the big shows. So I've found a way so far to use my photography to get me into that world, and I've really applied myself there.
Well, we went a little bit over today, so thanks for the audience for hanging in there, but there were so many great stories and inspirational quotes and obviously photos. David Bergman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Alan. It was a pleasure.
We've recorded the whole thing, so in case you missed part of it or want to review some of the words of wisdom, you can see this on our blog in the next couple of days. But thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.